So we're continuing now to discuss the tax and the legal issues specifically. So, Herschel, what tax advantages are there from a limited company and what are some of the downsides?
Well, I think the two key tax advantages are, under the current regime anyway, mortgage interest relief. So you will continue to get mortgage interest relief with the law as it stands. The other advantage is that you're sheltering income at the lower corporation tax rate rather than your personal marginal rate. So those two are key factors in terms of advantages. If we're looking at the downsides, then you have a couple of things there. Firstly, you can't tell what future legislation is going to be, and a lot of people are moving their property portfolio into a limited company without realising that the legislation can change and put them exactly in the same position that they were trying to move from. There are also higher admin costs. So just the cost of running, administering a company, obviously the previous owner becomes an employee of the company. So you've got those issues to deal with as well. And also extracting the profits. The dividend allowance, as they frame it now, has come down to £2,000. So how else can you extract the profits efficiently? Particularly if you're talking about large lump sums. So if there's a property that has been disposed of within a limited company, how do you get those profits out? That can be a real problem.
I think this is the thing with portfolios, that the costs from the financial side of raising money as a buy-to-let on a limited company, the fees are so much higher than what they are for a normal residential buy-to-let for a single landlord, because the lenders know that it's a limited market, and if they know it's a limited market, they'll charge extra for the privilege. So the arrangement fees tend to be higher, the interest rates tend to be slightly higher, so you've got the landlord will be incurring more costs that way as well.
I suppose they also see it as a higher risk in terms of lending to a limited company over an individual.
At the minute, there's not been much difference. The strange thing is that they will actually lend more to a limited company than they would to an individual. They'll do a different ratio on a portfolio for a landlord in a limited company than they will do for an individual, but they're still wanting in the background the individual to have personal income just in case. So they're not purely looking at the actual limited company itself, they're also looking at the individual as a person as well, with his income.
So in terms of income then individually, these people still have to be working?
They still have to be, the sort of frame is usually around about 25,000 as a minimum income from some sources, which can't include the rental income of most lenders. So pension income, earned income has to be coming in, because they just want to see that if for any reason there's void periods, they always look at the worst case scenario, that even if there's 30 properties, if they were all not rented, has that client got some other form of income to keep himself going, even though it's lending to the limited company.
Okay, alright. So looking at the bigger picture then, if a landlord's already got a portfolio, I know we touched on this previously, but are there occasions where it makes sense to transfer all properties at one time? And is it possible if loans are already in place? I don't know where we want to start with this one.
From a lending point of view, it can be possible. Even if a limited company was set up today in the correct way, somebody will lend to it tomorrow. So there doesn't have to be a time frame of how long that limited company's been going for. It's just on the individual circumstances. And again, some lenders will accept those properties coming from sold into the limited company and use the equity in them as the deposit for the limited company to purchase them from the individual. But is it a good idea? I would suggest not, and she'll probably tell you many reasons why from a financial point of view.
Yeah, I mean, from a tax point of view, you would be wasting an awful lot in terms of tax breaks if you transferred everything over in one go. So, for example, just as a basic example, you have your annual exemption available for capital gains tax purposes, which is roughly £12,000 in the year. And if you're married, your spouse has a similar exemption. So you may want to, for example, change the ownership of the property before you transfer it in, or phase it over a number of tax years to gain those extra advantages. So if you're moving it in, for example, to gain mortgage interest relief, the actual annual exemption would be worth quite a lot, £12,000 of tax-free gain, which would be probably more than the mortgage interest saved.
Okay. So, in terms of companies then, who can be the directors and shareholders of limited companies, and what factors do they need to consider if looking to raise finance?
From a lending point of view, most lenders will accept up to 4 directors on an application, but you have to be careful in regards to the directors and the personal guarantees, because all lenders are going to want that in place. So as you know, I've had some landlords coming to me saying, well, if you put it into a limited company, then if it all goes wrong and the rents don't get paid or the houses go down in value, it doesn't matter, it's a limited company, I can just walk away. But as you know from a legal point of view, personal guarantees are quite a big thing.
They are, and this is something that we have to advise quite regularly on in terms of company setups and the individuals behind those companies. So we act on behalf of the company generally, and the lender may want separate legal advice for the actual individual guarantors or directors, so that they're advised accordingly that their own homes, the rest of their business assets may be at risk as well. So from a personal guarantee perspective, usually, here's what it says on the tin, which is a personal guarantee. Your homes, your other assets may be at risk.
Yeah.
And we also have to advise on things such as floating charges and debentures as well, whereby if there are other assets within the business, then those could also be at risk if you fail to keep up repayments in relation to the particular property in question. So when you said earlier about greater greater costs in terms of setup on a mortgage side, also on the legal side, because there is a great deal of additional advice that has to be given both to the individual directors, the guarantors, and also in relation to the additional documentation that has to be reviewed. So, looking at that then further in terms of the HMRC and what annual information they need to be provided with, what other aspects are there to cover there?
So, first thing to say is that the legal company is a separate legal entity. Limited company is a separate legal entity, and therefore it has its own legal obligations. It has those to HMRC in terms of submitting accounts to HMRC, producing a tax return, paying its own corporation tax, and in order to do that it has its own obligations in terms of record keeping and so on. So effectively, if you have a single limited company and you're an individual, you've effectively doubled the compliance requirements.
Yeah.
If you have more than one company, then obviously it's even greater.
Yeah.
Just going back to a point that was raised previously, a lot of landlords are bringing in their children as shareholders on some of these SPVs, and that is something that you also have to take advice on, because whilst it's great to have the children involved and it may work long term in terms of inheritance tax planning or even capital gains tax planning, it may affect the ability to raise funding.
I've seen one already, and from a lending point of view, obviously lenders, if a 50% shareholder has been given to a 14-year-old child, the lender's not going to be quite happy about lending to that kind of company. Because obviously from a legal point of view, if anything does go wrong, struggling. So you've got to be careful on that, depending on how you're wanting the portfolio to run in the future. If you're not looking to borrow any more money, it can be great advice and can have good advantages. But if you're looking to expand the portfolio and keep borrowing against it, and obviously at some point your fixed rate may come to an end and you want not to remortgage, it's the same situation. If you're wanting to change lender and it's been set up in a certain way, then you might not be able to get access to any more funds or even get a new rate.
Okay, good.
And in terms of HMRC, it's not just the HMRC requirements, you've also got company's house requirements, so you need to file accounts there, do annual returns and so on.
Yeah, indeed. And in relation to company mortgages, there is strict filing requirements in relation to MRO1 documentation and very tight timescales as far as that's concerned as well, which you don't want to fall foul of company's house. So, in summary on this section then, if I come to each of you in turn, Top 3 tips with regard to the aspects discussed so far.
I think, as we've said before, take advice on the situation that you're getting into and where you're seeing that situation going in regards to your portfolio now and in the future, from a mortgage point of view, a tax point of view, and a legal point of view, because what you do now can have implications going forward and in the future.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think there's a real risk that people are allowing the tax tail to wag the dog, and you do have to look at the whole picture, not just one aspect of it.
So,
and to future-proof what you're doing.
to take advice from all 3 aspects is the question, and the answer, in fact. This is the end of part 2. So in part 3, we're going to summarise where we're at and have a look at the exit strategies. Thanks.